This is the 28th episode of Automation Hour, and we have today with us guest speaker MVP Nana Gregg. So logistics-wise, all lines are muted. Please use the chat function to ask questions as Nana goes through her presentation, or if you have a general process automation question, you can ask that as well. And if we don't get to your questions during the session, we will continue that discussion on the Success community. We'll also be posting the deck as well as the recording to the Success community, also on our website, automationhour.com, and we'll be communicating that out on Twitter as well. So in our current series, Nana will be kicking off the intermediate series that will be running for 4 weeks, and then we'll move on to the advanced series, which takes us into mid-January. And we want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io, for allowing us to give this great content out to the community. And here are your co-hosts, David Litton, Rakesh, and myself, and we will be seeing you at Dreamforce. Also, I will be presenting 2 sessions at Dreamforce, workflows, processes, triggers, and more. See the forest for the trees, and Process Automation Showdown #1, and Rakesh will be presenting in Process Automation Showdown #2. So come by and see us. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Nana to give our presentation. Let me change over to Nana.
Thank you, Jen. I am super excited to be here today. So just a little bit of background about myself since the slide's gone away. I work for a company called Jones Lang LaSalle, and I'm the senior Salesforce administrator at the company. I've been administering Salesforce for just over a decade, probably about 12 years now, so since it was an itty-bitty baby, and have learned a lot over the years. I'm a Salesforce MVP, and I'm the co-host of the CloudForce Collective podcast as well, so check that out at cloudforcecollective.com. So we were talking about process automation, and I am an admin at heart. I've taken the Rad Women coding course, and I've taken the object-oriented development course so that I could learn about Apex coding and about triggers, mainly so that I could learn about how to talk to developers about those things. And also because I didn't have a way to do a lot of things in my org. You know, I could do a lot of the point and click things, and if we're thinking a few years ago before Process Builder and before Visual Flow, there was a line, a very definite line drawn in the sand as to what I could do and what I couldn't do as an admin. And when Process Builder came out, super excited. Flow came out, super excited. And then as I sort of combined those with what I learned through taking some of those coding courses, I really realized that I could do more with these point-and-click solutions than I ever thought that I could. They were scary at first. You know, you've been through some of the if you've seen some of the beginner automation hour sessions, if you've never looked at the visual workflow before, it looks daunting if you're just, you know, if you're used to your administrative point-and-click stuff. But once you learn how to use it and learn some of the terminology, it really opens up a world of things that you can do. So what we're going to do today is I had a really distinct need. So roll-up summary fields. So we all know what they are, right? If you've got parent-child objects, you can create a roll-up summary field on the parent object that sums up some sort of value from the child objects onto that parent object. So the number of open opportunities on an account or something like that. But you can only use those in parent-child situations where you actually have a master detail lookup. And a lot of times, if you come in and as an administrator to an org that's already been built, or maybe you get a managed package that was built and handed to you and you can't make too many changes to it, you're in a situation where you have records that are related to each other through lookups, but they're not parent-child relationships. They're not master detail, but you still want to do a roll-up summary field. Now, before, you would have to write a trigger for that. As an admin, hopefully you have a developer on staff. If you don't, then you're going to have to pay to do that. Otherwise, there's some apps on the App Exchange that you can download, you can configure, they'll do those things for you. But what I learned is that with the combination of a flow kicked off by a process builder process, you can easily recreate that yourself pretty quickly. It doesn't really take a lot of time to set it up. It takes a little time to think through it. So in this problem, we're actually going to build one today on the call. And in this problem, what I've got is, if you can see my screen, I've got an org. And to simplify it, I'm not showing my exact org, but this is a developer org that I've built. And it is basically a library. So if you think in the context of, I've got classes. So here I've got a couple of classes. I've got Miss Hinckley's reading class. I've got Mr. Simpson's history class. I have a library of books that my students can read, and my students can put in book reports for those classes. But in this particular setup, my classes and my book reports aren't parent-child objects. They've just got a lookup. So I've got students for the class, I've got book reports here, but these book reports are linked to the class. They're linked to the class, but they're not a master detail relationship. And what I really want is, without having to create a report for it, what I want is to be able to see at the top of this class, I just want to be able to see the number of book reports that have been logged for this class. I want to put a chart here in my Lightning setup, a component that shows me really quickly at a glance how many book reports have been submitted for the class. So really simple, you know, I just want to see what's been logged, but I don't want to write a trigger for it, and I don't really want to load an App Exchange app, although that's a viable option. So what I can do is think about the problem, right? So with a process builder process, I could trigger a flow. And so what we're going to do is we're going to write a flow that is going to, anytime a process builder, anytime a book report is edited or created or updated, right, that's going to trigger the process builder to kick off the flow. And the flow is then going to look at the book report, tell me which class that book report is from. It's going to cycle through all the book reports that have that same class ID, and it's going to count them. And then it's going to come back at the end, and it's going to stamp this class record with the total number of book reports. So it sounds a little complicated, but it's really not. One of the things that I like to think about, while I go to setup here and we'll look for our flows, is if you want an analogy for it, it's sort of like you're going to be going to a farm or an orchard, right? And at that farm or the orchard, you're going to be picking strawberries, not blueberries. You're going to be picking strawberries. So you've now got your, you've been given what you need to get. I need to get strawberries, not blueberries, right? And so you get a bucket. That's your collection, right? Where you're going to collect the strawberries. And then we're going to loop through those, and the strawberries that we want that meet a certain criteria, we're going to gather those out, right? We're going to count those up, and then at the end, we're going to put them in the bag and take them home. So that's essentially what our flow is going to do here. So we're going to start out and we're going to create the flow first. All right, so we'll come over here to our flow screen, easy to find and set up, and we're just going to kick off a new flow. Start from scratch. Always takes a minute to get the flow going. Come on, there you are. All right, and so if you're not used to doing flows, visual flows, it does look a little daunting, but jump in, practice what other people are doing, and just walk through exactly what they do, and you'll start to understand it. That's how I learned from watching Mark Ross, actually, on a webinar, work through flows. It gave me the confidence to try it myself. So what we want to do here is, this is going to be kicked off by a process builder process, right? And that process builder process is going to give us the ID of the class that the book report's been submitted for. So when that ID comes into the flow, we need to first do a fast lookup. So a fast lookup element essentially finds Salesforce records so it can assign the field values of those records to a collection. So that's what we want to do, is we want to find all the book reports with that same class ID. So with this fast lookup, I'm just going to call it, we're going to look up book reports. All right. And here we go. We're going to look up book reports. Okay. And we want book reports that meet the following criteria. All right. So here it's going to give me fields that are available on my book report. You've got standard fields and custom fields. All right. And in this case, I want to meet the criteria where the class equals, we're going to create a variable for this, because this variable is what's going to be passed in from our process builder flow. So we're going to call this variable, I always like to name my elements kind of, I start it with kind of what it is. This is a variable, so I call it a var. And this is going to be my class ID that my process builder is giving us, is putting into this flow to kick off this flow. So the input-output type here, this is where it becomes really important, is when you're being provided an ID or a value to kick off the flow, you're going to say this is going to be an input type. And if I hover over the info things are really helpful. So this variable can be set at the start of the flow via URL parameters. Okay, so we're going to have something's going to give us this ID value. Okay, and we don't need to set a default value. It's going to give that to us. Okay, and that's going to kick off the flow. So when the flow kicks off, it's going to look for book reports where the class ID equals the value of the class ID that they're giving us from that process builder process. All right, and so then what we want to do, so we'll scroll down here a little bit, is at this point we need to create a new collection variable. Okay, what the collection variable is going to do is, the collection variable is sort of like your basket with your strawberries, right? We need somewhere to put all those records as it finds them so that it can gather them up and then do its little loop. So we're going to call this an S-object collection of my book reports. It's not book reports, it's book reports. Okay, so it's going to be a collection of my book reports. And my object type, now I get to come in and pick which object, right? So this is my book reports. So this is going to create that collection, that basket to put all the book reports in so that I can then loop through them and do my counting that I need. All right. All right. And then you get to pick, which fields you want to save in the variable. This is if you're going to be doing multiple calculations potentially. So on my book reports, in this case, we're just going to count the number of book reports for each class, but I actually have on my book records, I have the number of pages. And so I could essentially, if I wanted to, if I put the number of pages in here, I could sum up the number of pages that each class has read. So you can do a lot of things here. In this case, since we're just going to count them, the only field I care about is I'm just going to pop the ID in there. Okay, so we're going to grab the ID of each book report and then we're going to count them. So I'm going to say okay. For some reason my mouse stopped working because it's a webinar and that's what happens. All right. So the next thing we want to do is we've got our lookup, so it's going to look up our book reports that meet that criteria and it's going to pop them in the little basket. So that we can evaluate them. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to loop through those. So what we want the system to do is it wants to go through and basically look at each strawberry, or in this case a book report, and see if it meets our criteria. So I'm going to call this a loop. All right. And so we're going to loop through the book reports. And everybody that shows you how to do this is going to have a little different naming convention. People that are traditionally developers will have a specific naming convention. So just do what works for you. Okay, so I'm going to loop through my collection, right? In ascending order. In this case, I don't really care what order it does it in. I'm just going to pick ascending order. And then we need to create then a variable where it's going to store the information that I'm gathering. In this case, I'm counting it. So I'm going to create a little variable that's going to hold the count for me as it does its loop and finds those that meet the criteria. Okay, so I'm going to call this count records. Okay, and again, we are going to count our book reports. We're going to say, all right, so we've got our fast lookup, we've got our loop. We'll go ahead and connect those. All right, so as it loops through, we need to count, right? So we've got our collection, we've got our loop set up to loop through the information, but now we've got our count that we need. So essentially we want to count the records. We're going to use what's called an assignment element, where we can set or change the value of those variables that we set up earlier, right? So right here, we're going to call it count book reports. All right, and if we were summing up the book reports and the number of pages, we could do that here at the same time. The flow that I use in my org, I actually sum up a lot of values. It's some currency values, and I've got 3 or 4 different currency values that it sums those up on each of my records, and it goes back up to the other object and stamps those values on the object. So in this case, we want to just count the book reports. So we are going to create a new variable here. Okay, and we want to, in this case, it's going to be a number, okay? And because we're just counting the records, what we want to do is every time a record gets passed in through the loop, we want to start at 0, right? And we want to count them. So we're going to then add 1 here. So we're going to add the number 1. Really simple, okay? So we're going to start at 0. We're going to add 1 for every strawberry or every book report that gets sent over that meets that criteria where the class ID matches the class ID that we've pushed in from our process builder process. So this one's a really simple one. If you had, if we had added the number of pages, then we would add a variable here where it takes the number of pages and it adds it to the previous number of pages value, right? So it's going to just sum those up. I hit OK here. And so now we need to kind of link these together, right? So when we've passed our information into the bucket, right, then what we need to do is we need to loop through the records, and the records that meet the criteria, we need to send them over for each value in the collection. We need to go to that element. So we'll just connect them right there. All right, I'm going to pull this out a little bit so you can see. So you can see we've got an arrow over to the assignment. So for everything that it finds, it's going to send it over here, and it's going to count it up. But what we need to do is we need to send it back, right? So that it can restamp that variable that we created that's going to hold the number of book reports. So to do that, we kind of just pull it right back. And now you've got an arrow on both sides. That means, that lets you know that you're looping all the way through, okay? So we're looping all the way through all of the book reports that meet the criteria. We're going to count them up, okay? And then at the end, what we want it to do is we want it to update a record, right? Because we want to go back to our class record, and we want to update the class record with that number. All right, so we want to update. It's a custom object. Update our class record. Okay, where the ID of the class equals our original class ID. Remember, we've got that right here. It's under our variables. So our original class ID, we want to go find that. And then what field do we want to update? We want to update, I've got a number of book reports right here. And we want to update that value with our count, okay? With our count that we created. All right. And so once it's looped through everything and gotten all those numbers, we're going to come down here and we're going to update our class record. All right, so that looks pretty good. I think we've done it correctly. It's always fun to do a live webinar. We've got a set of start elements so that you tell the system exactly which element to start on so that when the process builder kicks off the flow, it knows where to start. So it's going to look it up, it's going to loop through and gather the records, it's going to check the records, and it's going to count the ones that met our criteria, and then it's going to come down and it's going to update that class record again. So I think we're good. So now let's go through and let's save this flow. All right, and we're going to call it, and it's going to be an auto-launched flow because it's going to launch from a process builder process. All right, that's all we need to fill out. I'm going to hit OK. If for some reason I've got errors, it's going to tell me that I've got errors. That'll tell you up here, it'll pop up that you've got some errors. You can troubleshoot and fix those errors. In this case, it's telling me that this is an inactive flow. So we need to activate it. So I'm going to hit close here, and then we're going to activate that flow. And then we need to build our process so that we can kick it off, right? Let's activate our flow. So it's active, and let's go build a process. I love Process Builder. It's one of my favorite things. As an admin who's been an admin for a really long time, getting tools like Process Builder and Visual Workflow are phenomenal. Back in the day, we didn't have anything like this. So, all right, we've got a new process. We're going to say this is our book report update, and we're going to kicks off flow. Just give it a little description. It's going to start when a record changes. All right, I'm going to hit save here. All right, so let's add an object. All right, so what's going to start our process? Our process is going to start when someone edits or updates or creates a book report. So anytime it's created or edited. All right, we want it to kick off this flow. Add some criteria. We don't really need any criteria. We just want to execute the actions every time it's updated. We could say that if the class is updated, that it kicks off the flow. But in this case, I just want to do it at any time. I don't have that many records, so it's not gonna hurt any of my limits. It's not gonna bog down my system. But if you have some criteria that you want to meet here, for instance, if the status is updated to something specific, maybe on my book reports I actually have a checkbox where the teacher can mark that they've reviewed it. So maybe I only want to count the records once they've been reviewed and checked by the teacher. I could put those criteria in right here. So, but in this case we just want to kick it off. So we're just going to kick off the flow. Let's save it here. And let's add our action. And our action is going to be a flow. This is where activating that flow was really important. We went back and activated it. The first couple times that I did it, I forgot. I like saved it and went, okay, now I'm going to go build my process. And I never activated it. And if you don't activate it, it doesn't show up here. And you've actually got to back out of your process builder process and go activate it. So just a little gotcha. Let's give it a name. So we're just going to call it flow because I'm lazy. And then here, because we're taking an input variable, right, we want this process builder to send the ID of the class that was tagged on that book report record, and we want to send it in as a variable to that flow. So we want that variable to be set with the class ID. All right. So let's find, here's our class lookup field, and let's go find our record ID. All right, there we go. So when a book report is edited or created, it's going to kick off this process builder process, and it's going to send that class ID into our flow, which is then going to trigger our flow to run, right? And it's going to go find all the other book reports for that class, and it's going to update the number. All right, so let's activate this process. Confirm here. All right, now we want to go try it out, see if it works. We've got it all set up and running. Let's go over here to Miss Hinckley's class. Let's take a look at Mrs. Hinckley's class. We got 2 book reports. All right. And we'll take a look at Mr. Simpson's class and see how many book reports he has. Oh, he's got 5 book reports. All right. So let's go in here, and if I was one of my students, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to search my list of books. Let's go look at all of my books here. And we're going to pick a book to read. Let's see, Last Kids on Earth. That sounds like fun. All right, we got this book here. It's 3rd grade reading level. Let's do a new book report for this. All right, so I'm going to have my student fill out this book report. Let's see, today is Friday the 13th. And I am in, let's see, I'll be in Mr. Simpson's history class. How about that? We're going to read it for Mr. Simpson's class. And let's give our review of the book. Pretty good book. This is like, I gave this like 100,000 characters so the students can really enter in a good book report. Let's say highly recommended. All right. And now let's save the record. All right, so now we've got a book report, and we put that in Mr. Simpson's history class, right? So let's go back and take a look at Mr. Simpson's history class. And voila, you see my number of book reports has updated to 6. And we've got 6 book reports. Let's refresh our little chart here, see if that's, there we go, we've got 6. But now what I want to do is this American Girl book report should really be, let's see, where's the book report? There's the book report. Let's take a look at the book report. And this should really not be in Mr. Simpson's class. This should be in Miss Hinckley's class. So I'm going to go ahead and just edit this. Because we logged it on the wrong class, right? So I'm going to go ahead and edit. Let's save the record. All right, now let's go back to Mr. Simpson's class. And sometimes in Lightning, it doesn't automatically, I have to refresh my page because it's not always exactly right. Let's take a look. Sometimes in Lightning I get it, it's a little bit slower. Let's go take a look. It's still showing me 6. Let's go to Miss Hinckley's class and see if hers got updated. She's got 3 records. She has the American Girl that we just moved over. All right, let's go back to Mr. Hinckley's class, see if that one's updated yet. Not Mr. Simpson's class, that's the one we were looking at. And it looks like it has not updated, even though we edited that record. So we've got a little quirk here. We just got 5. Let's edit another record and see if maybe that will help us. All right, this one's in Mrs. Hinckley's class. Let's get another book report and edit a record. This one's in Mr. Simpson's class. Let's see if maybe changing the date, because we're editing it, it should kick that flow off. We should update. It should update for us. I'm not sure why it didn't. It's always good to have problems, right, when you're going through these, so that we can go through and dig in. And there we go. It's now updated. So really simple solution for a roll-up summary. Now, if you ask the question of what if a record is deleted, that is, I haven't gotten that far yet. I'm still learning. So right now, I only have my flows set up for if records are created or updated. I know in visual workflow, you can account for deleted records. But for right now, our flow only kicks off with that process builder process when a record is updated or created. It does not happen when it's deleted. So hopefully one of the future sessions in this intermediate or advanced series will talk about how we can use visual workflow to account for a record that gets deleted so that we don't have to use code for that either. So we'll quickly take a look. Here's our process builder process. Really simple one to kick off a flow, and I'll flip back to our flow. Let me go back here so you can pull the flow up on the screen, and then while that's on the screen we can see what questions there are.
Okay, Jane has a question. What do you recommend for backfilling old records before you turn this live?
For backfilling old records. So, see if I understand the question. So in this case, I already had a bunch of book reports, right? And I didn't have any data for that number of book reports on either of the records. So it was a blank field. And the first time it kicks off, it's going to count all of those old records. So as long as they meet your criteria and they're in the system, it's going to do what it needs to do. In fact, if we come here, I could actually, because I'm a system admin, I can delete this value, right, and save the record. See, let's reload. Sometimes I've noticed in Lightning that my page reloads are a little off. I'm hoping that will come up quick. So I've deleted the value because I'm a system admin and I can do that. But I still have all those book reports. So that's all my old data, right? And then all I have to do is let's just add a new book report, right? Let's just pick another one. And then it's going to go through all those old values and it's going to update. So I don't think there's anything special that you need to do. You don't need to reload records or anything like that. The next time something happens, it's going to go through and count them all. So, but as always with Lightning, I usually have to navigate back and forth to get the record to update. It's not this slow in Classic. There we go. 6 books. So as long as the records are there, it's going to go through and count them. And if you're doing a summary of currency values or something like that, it's going to go through everything that meets your criteria. In this case, it's every book report that's for this class, regardless of how many there are.
So Rick had a question. Any idea on the limit on number of records that can be counted before error occurred during the flow message displays?
Good question. I do not. We can go back and research that. Jen, David, do you have any idea?
I don't know, David or Cash.
No. Yeah, I think that's tough to always find out.
because it depends. So you can go through, your flow has the ability to go through 2,000 elements, which would be just any of the things that you're dragging onto the screen. So depending on how complicated your loop is, that would determine how many records you could deal with. So when you were showing just the one assignment inside of a loop, if it's that, you could hit over 1,500 records. If it's something else that has a few more elements in there, then you're going to be at a smaller number.
Yeah, I think if you've got something that's got thousands and thousands of records, you're better off writing a trigger for that. You're going to bulkify it, right? You're going to do it the proper way. This is sort of the simple way when you don't have thousands and thousands of records to accomplish something.
Correct. So if you have thousands of records, you simply hit the CPU limit or float time out limit exception error.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to give it another minute or two if others have questions, either related to Nana's presentation or a general process automation question.
One thing that I'll throw out there that I wanted to mention is when you're in the Flow Designer, this is a link that I make use of a lot. This help for this page. Let's pop it open. Takes you right to your awesome help resources. It explains every element, why you might use those elements, why you might use the different resources. It gives you some examples, and then of course you can search at the top and it's going to give you some resources. You can ask questions in the community, so take advantage of those help links.
Okay, Christina has a question. What are some other examples of flows that Nana has written?
So the one that kind of kicked this off, this is a really simple one. I kind of tried to simplify it. So in my org, we use a couple of managed packages, one of them being Financial Force PSA for project management. So it's a managed package, and in that managed package we have projects. And every project has milestones. Well, it's only a lookup relationship. It is not a parent-child or master detail relationship. You can have milestones without having a project. And I can't change that relationship because it's a managed package. So what we wanted is we wanted to quickly and easily show on our project some summary values from those milestones, the amounts that we're billing, the total number of hours that we're logging. Some of these things are built in to Financial Force PSA, and then some of the things we've customized out of the box. But we wanted to, at a project level, I mean, in a report, I can get projects with milestones and sum up those values, but I wanted to be able to just, at a glance, look at the project and see summaries of those remaining values and things like that. And so I was able to set up a flow where anytime a project milestone is edited or created, that the flow kicks off and it goes through and it looks at the project and it finds all the milestones for the project and it takes all the values that we're interested in and then it stamps the project back with those values. So it's really simple, but it accomplished what we needed with that managed package without having to write any code or triggers for that.
Cool.
And I actually do have, I do have the Roll-Up Helper app installed, and we use that for some other more complicated roll-ups. This one was a simple one. My first flow that I did on my own that was kicked off by a process. So.
All right, last call for questions. See if anyone's like seriously typing.
So my final comments would be, don't be afraid of getting in and just playing with Visual Flow. If you haven't gone in there and looked at it, played with it, created something, replay this back and just create the same one for yourself. I created this in my Trailhead org. I set up all the objects, and then I just walked through. And as I was practicing it the other day, I'm getting errors and it's not kicking off, and I had to troubleshoot myself to get it to work. But that helps me learn, right? And learn how to do it better, so that next time I can just create it, with the snap of a finger. Pull up examples of what other people have done and just try it out. Don't be afraid. You're not going to mess anything up as long as you're not doing it in your live org. Don't ever do it in your live org.
Exactly. Okay, I know a bunch of people mentioned that this was super helpful, and thanks for going through this with us. It made it very relatable with the whole book report example for sure. So I think we're it for questions. So thank you so much, Nana, for coming to present. And we will be posting this out on the Success Community, Salesforce Automation Hour, as well as automationhour.com and our YouTube channel. Thanks so much, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Happy Friday the 13th.
See you next week. Bye-bye.